Welcome to Austin Tech Connect, the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Presented to you by Netspend. Homegrown in Austin, Netspend has been a leading provider of consumer and business payment solutions for almost 25 years. From prepaid cards to mobile bank accounts to money movement services, Netspend connects people, brands, and payment products to deliver innovative financial solutions.
Welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the podcast about the future of Austin's technology community. My name is Thom Singer, and I am with the Austin Technology Council. And what we do at the Austin Technology Council is we try to help local companies grow, thrive, and connect. And each week on this podcast, we bring people who are part of this tech ecosystem. We bring them here to talk about what it is they're doing and what they think Austin should be doing as a community to grow into the future. And today, I am happy to invite to the show Kevin Koym. He is the founder and CEO at Tech Ranch. Hey, Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tom, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with another one of the original gangsters of Austin.
You know, I have known Kevin for a long time, probably 20 some odd years. And it's always fun when I get to have people on the show who I've really watched grow and change in this technology community. We love to have people who are new to Austin on the show. We have guests all the time who've been here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But those of us who've been around since the early days, it is fun to be able to kibitz a little bit about where Austin has come from and where we're headed next. So for those of you who don't know Kevin, he is, as I said, the CEO and founder of Tech Ranch. Now, what Tech Ranch is it's an entrepreneur support organization that helps discover talent and then connect that talent with other people around the world who can help them make an impact. Kevin is often flying around the globe, connecting with various entrepreneurs in different markets. I think it's been 28 countries the last 6 years, and he wants to help them. Yeah, he wants to help them solve the big problems. He is passionate about issues that really impact humankind, and he really looks for impact innovation technology where they can actually do things that will save lives and make humanity better. So, Kevin, let's talk about your early days. You certainly didn't start off traveling the world, connecting people and entrepreneurs who want to have large impact. Let's talk about, where'd you go to school? What was the early days of Kevin?
I started right here in Austin, Texas. I have an electrical engineering degree at the University of Texas at Austin. That's when I grew up in San Antonio, came up here to go to school, absolutely fell in love with Austin. And that's kind of where it all started at engineering school. Quickly, right after that, while I was still working on my degree, I got to work at a technology startup called Next. Many of you might have heard before.
That was Steve Jobs' company between Apple and Apple.
He'd gotten fired for Apple. He started something, and just by luck, I ended up getting to start as a campus rep for Next, and then left as I got my degree, got to work for the company full time for several years. And so fell in love with technology startups and on top of my love for Austin.
So did you go to the Valley while you were with Next, or did you stay here in town?
Well, since I was a young guy, I was the young single guy. I was one of the youngest system engineer in the whole nation, actually in the world, I think it was. They would a lot of times put me, the older system engineers that were in their 30s and their 40s, and I think one of them was in the 50s, would put me on airplanes before anyone else. And especially if the project was very visible but likely to fail, they would actually put me on it. And then surprisingly, the name I got for myself was I'd somehow walk out of the project with somehow figuring out how to get the project to work. I got a bunch of examples like that. It was a trial by fire type of environment, but I absolutely loved it.
Okay, so Next came to an end. When did that end up, and what'd you do next?
So I was there for 3.5 years. Ended up going to another startup here in town called Pencom. Many of you would have heard of that. Was there for about a year, and then launched my first startup, which we had a really advanced piece of database software in 1994 here in Austin. First customer ended up being a bank in Mexico. So this is where I started the whole process of stepping across country boundaries. And my first early adopter, that first $250,000 customer, was a bank that had been bought by a security trading firm in Mexico. And in the integration of their systems, they absolutely were desperate for this 24-year-old software And that's how I got my international start. That's how I got my start as a startup founder. It's also how, I, kicked off this whole entrepreneurial career of mine.
All right, so let's talk about Tech Ranch. Tech Ranch has been around a long time, but I think a lot of people in the community, they've heard of it, but they really don't know what you do or who you are. And I know that, there's been a couple of iterations as well along the way. When did you found Tech Ranch, and let everybody know how it started and what it stands for?
So Tech Ranch originally, I started this part of my career of supporting entrepreneurs in 2003. And the whole thing that happened is I'd been, a technology founder. I'd started a bunch of different skunk works, like when Dell Online, the first $2 billion of computers sold at Dell.com were sold on software. I started in my living room. And so I had that normal kind of tech founder experience, and I got my face on the cover of Computer World magazine. But then I had a terrible tragedy. I lost one of my friends to suicide in 2003. And I said to myself, I've got to go do something different. I can keep on playing the founder game. But the truth was that it just didn't make sense to me anymore. So it was when that tragedy happened, I said, I've got to go do something that will give back, that's going to make a difference in the world. And the truth is that, when I started that part of my career in 2003, I started Austin's first co-working space in 2005. But the reason that a lot of people don't know what I did was because I started this because of tragedy. I really wasn't trying to do anything for anyone else. I wasn't trying to get any visibility. And I recognize as I look back, a lot of times people are like, dude, what are you up to? And there's literally over the years, more than 10,000 people in Central Texas went through one of my programs, not just came to our events, but went through one of our first programs. But the idea was, I was trying to fill the void of losing this friend and trying to have an impact on the world, because I was upset. I was actually ragefully angry about what happened. And so the thing that happened was the first decade of this type of work, well, actually till around 2008, 2009, well, I guess so not truly a decade yet, but that first chunk of time was really just about just seeding a bunch of ideas into the world. I got invited to Chile in 2003 as well. Got to work with the Chilean government in changing the entrepreneurial outcomes of that country, as well as landing and working with one of the main guys behind Bootstrap Austin, along with Bajoy Goswami in the early stages of 2003, 2008, and 2009. Started what I called the Bootstrap Incubator. This is when we opened up the first co-working space. And it wasn't until the end of, right around 2009 that Tech Ranch became named Tech Ranch, because one of my co-founders was a guy by the name of Jonas Lamas, who was just a walk on water, amazing guy. He said he came in and he saw what I had started, and he said, what we really need to do is put a bigger name behind this and pull a bunch of the threads together. And that happened during that time frame. Now, sadly, his wife was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And because of that, he had to step away. So I got this cardboard cutout of Jonas to kind of stand next to as we were building things. And that's when Tech Ranch actually really, became known as Tech Ranch, when we started all the campfire meetings where, we'd bring the community together.
Well, and that's what I remember, right, is when those events really sort of began. And, it was really bringing the community together. And back then, there wasn't as many organizations and nonprofits and 501c3s and 6s that were serving the tech community. There were a handful. There was the Austin Technology Council. There were a few other organizations. And then Tech Ranch was doing these really welcoming, kind of everybody was welcome. There was no judgment as far as, who you were, or what your job title was, or what your dream was. And you mentioned that the programs you put on, you'd had over 10,000 people go through these programs over the years. What types of programs did you put on back in those days?
Especially the one that I'm most proud of from the standpoint of the impact it had on the Austin community. There was something that we learned from the Austin musician hippies about how they would care about each other. And, we don't have as many musicians in Austin as we used to, at least from a standpoint of density. But one of the things that, had me, I had worked for a Steve Jobs startup. I had full access to the Bay Area. But why did I come back to Austin? The reason I came back to Austin is I miss I care about you, you care about me, and we're going to help each other build our ventures out. I really, really missed that, because the problem in Silicon Valley was, you could be in social media technology and I could be in water technology, but we'd be at each other's throats trying to destroy each other, which doesn't make sense. This whole notion of vying for status. And part of the thing that I actually noticed, and it's part of the program that we now lead as we do this work across the world. When you're building wealth building happens in a community. It doesn't happen in a status game. It's not one up, one down. Let's a zero sum game. It's like that thing of you and I working together back and forth. That concept brought me back to Austin because I really missed it. I really missed, like you wouldn't believe, that feeling. And so back to the notion of these campfire meetings, part of what I wanted to do is I recognized that, and I wanted to enhance it about how is it that, these early stage entrepreneurs, because there wasn't a lot, there was Thai Austin, and there was the Austin Software Council. And other than that,
which became the Austin Technology Council.
Yeah, which became Austin Technology Council. Other than that, there were no other organizations to support entrepreneurs, especially ones that kind of want to do the true startup thing. There was a lot of small business, and not to knock the small business programs, because those are important, but they weren't startup programs. And so the whole idea about this was, let's drop the barrier. Let's get rid of the status game where people are faking it and acting like that they have things that they don't really, like the guy who's like, how are you doing? Oh, we're just absolutely killing it. And, the person's secretly dying inside. I couldn't stand that type of conversation that would happen out in the Bay Area, out in Silicon Valley all the time. I wanted the authenticity of Austin. And so campfires are all about that. We also started a program, a 10-week accelerator program that was called Venture Forth, had 50 cohorts of around 15 entrepreneurs per cohort over the years. That was another thing that quite a number of entrepreneurs in Austin, as well as, we had people driving in from Louisiana for every week for all 10 weeks for these type of programs as well. That early stage, how to get things off the ground type of program, which I really, really, really love working with entrepreneurs at that early stage. Now, most of the work we've been doing over the last, recent years has been with scale-ups that are gaining access to markets, international markets. But the truth is that the Campfire, our program Venture Start, our program Venture Forth, all those programs were for that early stage to really, because not many people truly advocate for getting things, ventures off the ground, right? That first start, there's not a lot of partners around an entrepreneur to get him or her to that first start.
So again, that's how you got your start. Now, the last few years you've been on the road. Every time I follow you on social media, you're in Eastern Europe, you're in Chile, you're somewhere different. So where have you morphed to, and what is the purpose and the direction of Tech Ranch now?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of times people don't know the history because I didn't tell the history years ago. But when I started Tech Ranch, the first 1,000 entrepreneurs to go through one of our programs were actually in the country of Chile. And so I lived in Chile for most of 2003. Part of the idea is this, and this is the vision behind Tech Ranch that started from day one, but really has started to take off now. Yes, it's been 20 years. It's been a long quest, but this is it. My premise is all the world's problems have already been solved. All the world's problems have already been solved. It's just a matter of connecting the entrepreneur with the solution to the market with the problem. Now, there's some people have said, wait, I don't necessarily believe that, but there's a really well quoted quote from science fiction writer William Gibson that says, the future's already here. It's just not widely distributed yet. Well, if you believe that to be true, one of the corollaries on that is all the world's problems have already been solved. Just a matter of connecting the entrepreneur solution with the market problem. I had that vision 20 years ago. And that's one of the reasons that even though I was an Austin-based entrepreneur, I went down, worked with the Chilean government, convinced this one senator who was a presidential hopeful. I was like, I'm God's gift to entrepreneurship. I know. 20 years has been humbling, but that was the thing that I went down there and said. And the reason is that many parts of the world have insight that are needed in other parts of the world. I'm going to give you a specific example from Chihuahua, Mexico, the city of Chihuahua, state of Chihuahua in Mexico. There's a technology in this little town that's really not known. It's not internationally known as an entrepreneur hotbed. But one of our entrepreneurs there that came through one of our bridges, what we call a venture bridge with Mexico, has this technology that for about $2 per time can test for heart attacks up to 8 hours before the big event. And the problem many times is that, if technology like this gets developed in the United States, it's really expensive. You got $1,000, Apple Watch on your wrist. And yeah, you can detect that things are happening in the heart if you recognize it. But a lot of times, could you imagine that we can actually have a wider group of people that have more access to these type of tests if we can actually do it at $2 per shot? And instead of I like to use the example of the Texas, the head of family, the big, strong masculine male, whether he's in northern Mexico or in Texas, who, is at the dinner table with his big family and the big event's coming, he's about to have a heart attack. Instead of, he doesn't want to go to the emergency room, but he might step away to go to the bathroom to do this test. That test, of course, would be developed in Mexico, not in the United States. And it's mainly because of the price dynamics. So when we recognize this sort of stuff, we start saying, okay, what else can we find from other parts of the world? Whether you mentioned Eastern Europe. Yeah, I was in Hungary. I was in the Czech Republic. We've got projects with Austria going on right now. I've recently talked to the ambassador of Slovakia about activities there. I've been on the ground in the last 6 years, 3 times in the country of Lithuania. That's a good example. The type of technologies that were right there behind the Iron Curtain and kind of trapped in a non-market solution, they've got technology that is able to as an example, the Lithuanians are known that they have 65% of the worldwide femto laser market. You care what the hell is a femto laser? If you've had surgery on your eyes with a laser, more than likely that laser came from Lithuania. And if you thought it was valuable to get to ditch the glasses, okay, well, what else is out there that we can actually liberate to other parts of the market? So I've got a bunch of different examples like that, but that's the thing that's been driving me to connect these entrepreneurs to other different markets. And
then what are you doing to connect Austin to some of these other markets?
Well, so I believe that the Austin model of entrepreneurship, you might look back to those years ago, we didn't have the density of Silicon Valley. We didn't have the density of Silicon Valley, but we did have this Austin hippie, I want to help you, you want to help me thing. We had connective tissue. We didn't have the density. Now we have actually the density that Silicon Valley had, but at the time we didn't. But then that same idea is this model of connecting the world. We're creating connective tissue among these different ecosystems. The real idea is a lot of times people around the world, like ecosystem leaders around the world, are hearing about what's happened in Austin. Austin used to not be on the list, the top 20 list of entrepreneurial hotspots in the world, and it became number one. It's been a couple of years ago since it's been listed, but it became number one, even beating out Silicon Valley, beating out other places like Tel Aviv and stuff like that. Now, I'd like to spot when we get to the second part. I'll tell you more about what I really think about what we need to do to really keep that. But the main thing about it is a lot of these other countries recognize that they want to connect into a softer landing point in the United States than Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley, a lot of times international entrepreneurs, they know about, but they'll bounce off that market because Silicon Valley is not as accessible as Austin is. And so in recognizing that, a lot of what we do is we host a lot of different delegations. We use Austin as a landing pad. We certainly help entrepreneurs gain access through Austin. We also have had, entrepreneurs or scale-ups land in through Austin, but end up connecting into Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, even El Paso, even Oklahoma City in recent years. And then because of our connections and our connectivity and the explosion of opportunity that's happening in Mexico, we also have a bunch of examples that are happening in northern Mexico as well. And so Austin, I think, is the gateway. in the terms of like South by Southwest, that conference that, has put Austin on the map, the name South by Southwest in itself implies two crossroads coming and meeting, right? The South Road meets the Southwest Road. So to your question, Austin is the crossroads that a lot of this connectivity happens through. It's the story that we're telling as we go to these different other parts of the world, but it's also naturally who we are. We bring, Austin never was really big in one particular market, but you'd see interesting connections between medical device and health, right? That you'd see education meets medical device, or you'd see like these cross intersections are where we've always excelled. And it's a very entrepreneurial, but also innovative culture that ends up setting the table for the larger conversation in the world.
Well, that's actually a good transition to sort of the second part of what I ask everybody who comes on the show. And that is, where do you think the Austin tech ecosystem is today? And where do you think we're going, or what do you think we need to be paying attention to?
I absolutely love this town. Every time I fly back, I just came back from a week in Chile and a week in Argentina, working in both those countries. And I absolutely love our town. I think the division in our politics and the division in some of the social issues and the division of how rough COVID was and all that sort of stuff, I think that we actually have some work to do. It's like a little bit of work to do there. And the thing about it is, with all the change that happened with what housing prices going up 40%, I think in 2021, and a lot of people coming into Austin that hadn't been inculcated with this culture, there's something that we need to renew. We need to reunite Austin in understanding what made this place so special. And I mean, obviously I've been a strong advocate for it. When I did the calculation and looked at the list of people we had, more than 10,000 people went through that process that I was really doing as an indoctrination process called the campfire. You can read about it at techranch.com/campfire. It's like this whole idea. I think we're actually at a point that we have to do something like this again, because the town has gotten more divided. And I want to refer back to something I said at the very beginning. Since I get to spend so much time looking at entrepreneurial ecosystems around the world, my big concern is when life starts being about a status game versus a wealth creation game. Some of you have heard it about a zero-sum game versus a infinite game. There's a book called Infinite Games, and it's really interesting about what it applies. But let's talk about this from the standpoint. If I'm focused on status and I create situations where it's, I win, you lose, Tom, that type of situation, communities don't build wealth when they operate that way. And part of what I think has happened is, Austin's more successful than it was when I came out of engineering school and I couldn't get a job here. And I ended up, going someplace else and following my dream to go to Silicon Valley. We became more successful, but we got kind of caught up in the status game. And the problem with the status game is it is a zero-sum game. And if it's your status versus my status, then I'm not going to help you. You're not going to help me. And that does not build a community. Communities build wealth. Communities build wealth. A lot of times I use the example of farmers. If you were, both my grandfathers were farmers here in Texas. My mom's dad, 30 minutes to the north of where we're sitting right now, where I've had, family members since 1868 in, Williamson County. If I was a cotton farmer and you're a cotton farmer, Tom, your family and my family, we're small-time farmers. We're competitors, right? Because you're selling cotton, I'm selling cotton. Well, no, not exactly. Because if my family doesn't help you get that cotton crop out of the field before the rains come, it's going to get destroyed. Or if your family doesn't help my family, it's because we work together that we created wealth together. There's some part of Austin that needs to be reminded about that. And people might think that the game has changed in terms of, technology and all that sort of stuff. The truth is, if you believe that the internet is making it more easy to collaborate than ever before, the communities that collaborate, that know how to collaborate as a fundamental piece of who they are the ones that are going to get ahead. And I personally think that the internet is going to create more collaboration opportunities. And the thing that I want to say is, a lot of times when people say, well, yeah, that's right, doesn't need to be that way, and blah, blah, blah. I remind people that the technology capital of the world for 60 years was this place called Detroit. It was the technology capital. And I'm not going to knock them, because they're actually getting their act together these days. And it's pretty exciting to see what they've done. But when 2008 came around, it was really clear how far Detroit stumbled all the way back into the 80s. They lost the ball. They lost the initiative. They lost everything, but they were the top of the world. And one of the things that happened is they became quote unquote successful. Then they got lazy. They started playing a status game versus a community building wealth creation game. Wealth creation happens with each other. We need to be working with each other. Okay, so back to the place I love. I love this town. I've, lived in this town off and on since 86 when I came here to get that engineering degree. I've been, an advocate, and I apologize to Austin that I went quiet because I needed to go pursue the vision of hopping on all those airplanes, going from, Pakistan to Lithuania to Nigeria to South Korea to South Australia to, Chile, Mexico, Guatemala, all these different, Japan, all these different places that I've actually absolutely loved getting to go to. And I'm, in September, I'm going to be in Italy. It just was in all these different places. I love being able to see the world, but the truth is, hometown, what we really need to do is unite Austin.
So I actually agree that I think that things have changed. And I think part of that culture and that vibe of connectivity and that welcoming feature that when I moved here, 32 years ago, I was actually counseled by a family friend who was very well connected in Austin, an older gentleman. He had been city manager. He owned a restaurant. And he told me, don't move to Austin, because you'll always be an outsider. You grew up in Southern California. You didn't go to Austin High. You didn't go to UT. And this was back in 1991. He said, you're always going to be that kid from California. And I did not take his advice, and I came. And within 2 years of being here, everything in Austin had changed, because it's about July 91 when Austin started to grow out of the situations of the 80s. And I moved here in July 91. By the way, I'm not taking credit for that. I'm just saying that those two things happened at the same time. However, what I ended up witnessing was a town that started, really unprecedented growth that, very few communities have ever seen. And it was very steady. It was very steady. It was very steady. And then 7 or 8 years ago, it went poof. And we added close to 1 million people in the last, 8 to 10 years into our community. And with that, it's harder to absorb that many people, in the course of just a handful of years. And so I think what has happened is a lot of people get here and it's harder to find their home. It's harder to find their place. And with so many more people, we have such an entrepreneurial culture. People start new organizations. They start new places for people to convene. So there's a lot more choices than there ever was before. However, I'm bullish on Austin. I think that while it's different, and I was talking to someone about this the other day, yes, a community grows, it's going to change. However, I think that, Austin's secret sauce is if we can make sure we're not creating, you call it status, people have different words for it. We're not creating a place that is always curated. Certainly there's a time to go to a private event that's been curated just for CEOs or just for CTOs. But if nobody ever ventures out into the greater community events that are put on by Austin Technology Council or the Chamber of Commerce or whoever it is putting on larger community events, if people say, well, but average people will be there, not people who are like me, then that starts to undermine the community. So my take on it is similar to what you're saying. And that is, I think that, we need to get back to, I help you, you help me, and I'm going to show up at things just because I think that that's what you do in a community. So that's my take.
Yeah, no, I have to concur with you because, it's like innovation happens in places like one of the reasons that Keep Austin Weird is such a powerful statement is it says that the rare and the like not normal is good. The problem when you do like large scale, industrial farming, as an example, is you have one crop. And the problem is with that one crop, if you have something like you have the wrong bug that gets dropped in that one crop, it destroys everything. That's kind of that's why I'm picking on Detroit as an example. Whereas if you have a place that celebrates the weird and says, hey, you be you, whatever that is, just you be you. And, and it's not so, cultured in a certain way where maybe it's a little bit different. That is really powerful. It's what Richard Florida wrote about, all those years ago in his book, when he was saying that you have to have, tolerance and talents and technology, right? That was his whole premise of the creative class. And we have to remember that and actually say that it's not just, I don't think it's just tolerance going forward. I think it's actually, it's like a preference to.
And one of the things, he talked about in the creative class of Richard Florida is that it was that convergence of art with technology was going to create the next big thing, which Austin became. I mean, that's really what happened. And that's something, as we've gotten more expensive, the density of artists have gone down in our town. And I think we have to find ways to embrace the arts here in Austin if we're from the tech community, because there's per capita going to be less artists because it's more expensive. Plus, we've just grown so much. And so I think that's really important. Hey, good.
I was going to say there is one premise that one of the things that I get the benefit from because I am traveling so much is I get to see places where all these different problems that we're up against have already been solved other places, like the price gap or the reason that the only problem that we really have is that we think that it has to be a certain way, that we're not questioning our assumptions. Like, my engineering professors would always kick my butt if I didn't make my assumptions explicit and then question them when I'm building something, back in engineering school, the same type of thing, all these different issues. There's a way of actually making it that the early stage or the instead of making the artist starve and the musicians starve, that we can actually still have space for them here. We should be. It's a failure to think deeper. And you can see it in these other cities and other places. Anyone that wants to challenge me about that, they should go with me on one of these next trips, and I'll show you. I'll actually take you to the places where I'm saying, hey, we might not be able to figure it out right here, but this group in Colombia, or this group in Santiago de Chile, or perhaps one of the other places, like in Budapest, I got to see an amazing integration in some of the arts with some of the technology that is going to blow your socks off. You won't see it in the market for another 3 to 5 years, but it's coming.
Nice. Well, if you go back and listen to last week's episode of this podcast, last week I interviewed people from 8 other cities that aren't cities we necessarily always would think about as technology hubs and what they're doing. And the reality is that I think that the whole world of tech is changing because, Boise is becoming, a place that champions their technology community. And it's like, who would have thought that? So as you go back and listen to last week's episode, you'll get a lot of thoughts on that just within the United States. Hey, Kevin, we're running out of time. I always ask everybody who comes on this show this question, and that is: community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. That's my belief. Which of those 3 words resonates with you the most, and why?
I latched on immediately to the notion of community. We got to be citizens, not residents. And what I mean by that is citizens take action on building what they want. I was kind of very happy to see that there are citizens that are standing up for what they'd like to see around Barton Springs and things like that, like getting involved. It's not just about the political statement, though. I think that we're at the point now that we can double down, and I'll steal some of the words collaboration as well, right? It's like basic to this concept that I call the Austin model of entrepreneurship. That, back in the days of Bootstrap Austin, when we had those 800 entrepreneurs working with each other, but it was a decentralized organization, it's just about collaborating. But through doing that, we're building the community. I want to really see us re-engender that, because I think that we're now at a point, as we come out of the days of COVID, that we can really build something that goes way beyond. And there are a lot of cities around the world that are looking to us. I think that we have an opportunity to really secure that position, and not just stop here in Austin, connect to the rest of the world, to Austin as well, and help build a wider community in the world.
Awesome. Final question. You've been here on and off since 1986. You've seen a lot of changes. A lot of the great restaurants that we all championed in the 90s are gone and things like that. But if you had someone coming to visit Austin and they were only going to be here for a couple of days, where's the one place, whether it was an attraction or a restaurant, that you would take them to make sure they experienced it?
You know what? One of the things I was really happy to see in the paper just in the last couple of days is Hole in the Wall. One of the restaurants we used to go to at UT. There's so many of the old places that have been lost, but you can go to Hole in the Wall. You can get a really stiff drink. You can have one of the reality sandwiches. You can sit there and listen to a musician who's playing his or her heart out, one single person on the guitar, and have an amazing experience. And it can happen on a Tuesday night. You don't see that in a lot of these other towns. And hole in the wall is a hole in the wall as it goes. I'm so excited that place is going to be saved. There's so many places we've lost, but I'm real excited about that.
Nice.
So that would be one of the places, because I used to scrape together my dollars back when I was at UT and go there every once in a while, and I still do to these days.
Nice. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being a guest here on Austin Tech Connect. Any final words?
I just am real excited, Tom, of what you're doing. I'm glad to see you in the leadership of the Austin Tech Council. I do believe that your leadership and what the Tech Council has always represented back to the 90s when I was in the Austin Software Council before. It's exciting to see that you're driving that renewal, and I'm excited to be a part of it and really looking forward to working with you into the future.
Nice. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and listened to this episode of the podcast. If this was your first episode, go back. There's 38 other episodes that you've got to check out. And make sure you tune in every week, because here at Austin Tech Connect, it's our goal to bring you interviews with a variety of people. Plus, if you know somebody who should be on this show, reach out to me and let me know. Hey, is your company a member of the Austin Technology Council? As we reinvent ATC and bring it back to being a grassroots organization, we can't do it without you. We need the grassroots, so we need the support of your company. Reach out and find out more about how to become a member of the Austin Technology Council.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.